I thought the worst part of being in the hospital was the pain. And yeah, it hurt. The kind of hurt that sits under your skin and hums, the kind you can't quite escape even when the drugs make your head float. But pain is predictable. It has a rhythm. You learn to brace for it, breathe through it, count the seconds until it lets go. What I didn't brace for was the moment I came home. The part no doctor warned me about. No nurse slipped into conversation while changing my IV. Nobody says, "Be careful when you walk back into your own life. It might not be the same one you left." You think you're returning to something safe. Your bed, your kitchen, your people. You think the ache will stay behind in that hospital room, sealed up in the smell of disinfectant and the crinkle of paper wristbands. But sometimes the real ache is waiting for you at your front door, disguised as comfort. Smiling, carrying your bags, smelling like someone else's perfume. The hospital pain, that I could medicate. That I could chart, monitor, manage. But the kind of pain you get when the faces you love most have been living a different story behind your back. There's no prescription for that. It doesn't spike and fade. It just sits there, reshaping you from the inside out. And I swear, if someone had told me the truth, I would have stayed in that hospital bed a little longer, because at least there, I knew exactly what was hurting me. They wheel you out in a chair even if you insist you can walk. Liability, tradition, whatever. I just remember the hospital doors sliding open, the outside air hitting me like a shock, and thinking, okay, that part's done. Time to go home. I had discharge papers stuffed in my pocket, a crinkly white bag of painkillers from the pharmacy, and that weird floaty hangover you get from days under fluorescent lights. I called a cab, told the driver my street, pressed my forehead to the window like a kid, staring at a city that hadn't paused just because I'd been lying flat. Shops were open. People were rushing. The world had kept moving, and I was about to step back into it. My name's Elise. I'm 29, and if you'd met me before all this, you probably would have called me Steady, the reliable one, the friend who remembers birthdays without needing Facebook, the girlfriend who stalks your favorite coffee before you even realize you're out. I live in a third-floor flat with creaky stairs and a window that looks down on the street like it's a stage. I work in events, which means I can smile through chaos without breaking. I thought my life was good in the simplest, most solid way. My best friend Megan, who I'd known since we were awkward teenagers, and my boyfriend Daniel, who I met through her 3 years ago. Megan was the sister I chose. Daniel was the man I thought I'd grow old with. Together, they were my safe circle. Which is why, when it broke, it didn't feel like one betrayal. It felt like losing my past and my future at the same time. The cab pulled up to my building. 3 flights up, same sticky banister, same stubborn fern outside 2B that Mrs. Patel kept alive out of sheer willpower. I fumbled with the keys, the overnight bag digging into my shoulder, and pushed the door open with my hip. It hit me before the lights were on. Perfume. Not mine. Something expensive, floral, sweet, but not sharp, the kind that floats instead of settles. We'll call him Daniel. 31. Quietly charming. The kind of man who could make nurses laugh when he asked a question. He stayed overnight the first few days. In that awful plastic chair with his jacket for a blanket. He fed me ice chips. He held a straw to my lips. He translated doctor speak when my brain was cotton. "You're doing great," he'd whisper. And I believed him, because his voice made belief easy. We'll call her Megan. My best friend for over a decade. She knew my passwords, my parents' birthdays, how I take my tea. She came to the hospital with flowers, not heavy roses or lilies, but small, bright daisies. She rearranged my tray, rolled her eyes at daytime TV with me, snapped photos so I'd have proof I could still be cute even with a wristband and bedhead. "I want you to like them." I did. That's the problem. The flat looked cleaner than I'd left it. Blanket folded instead of slumped on the sofa. A rinsed glass upside down on the drying rack. My favorite mug on the counter. I told myself Daniel had tidied. Or Megan. Or both. Because that's what good people do when you're not home. My phone buzzed. "Let me know when you get in X6 from Megan." "Home safe?" "From Daniel." I texted both. "Just walked in. Smells like flowers in here. Did you guys leave something?" A beat, then Megan. "LOL, guilty. Wanted it to feel nice when you got back. How are you feeling?" A minute later, Daniel. "Left a couple of things. I'll come by after work." I walked into the bedroom. Sheets tucked too neatly. Hospital tight, not my way. The perfume was strongest there, woven into the fibers. I told myself it was Megan's. She hugs like she means it. Hospitals make time strange. You step back out and the world has sprinted ahead. I stood in my living room, grateful and unsettled, trying to choose which feeling to feed. But I remembered day 3, propped up by pillows, half dozing. Megan and Daniel were by the window, sharing a laugh I wasn't part of. She'd snorted, nudged him, and when I asked what was funny, she said, "Nothing, just work stuff." But Daniel didn't work with her. Later, half asleep, I'd heard their voices again. Not flirty exactly, just easy. Too easy. I brushed it off then. Pain meds, paranoia. But standing in my flat, it came back sharper. A soft knock at the door pulled me back. I shuffled to the peephole. Mrs. Patel from 3B, the neighbor who knows everything without meaning harm. I opened the door. "Darling," she said warmly, "you're home. Thank God. How are you?" "Like a pincushion?" I tried to joke. She glanced inside, then back at me. "Wasn't sure when to expect you. Thought you were still away." Her voice dipped to a conspiratorial murmur. "They've been here a lot." I froze. "They?" "Your boyfriend and your friend," she said casually. "The nice ones, coming and going, very attentive." It was sweet. Sweet. The word landed like syrup in my throat. "Oh," I managed. She patted my arm. "Let me know if you need anything. I have Dal. Good for healing." When she left, I shut the door and leaned my forehead against it. They've been here a lot. Some sentences change the temperature of a room. That was one of them. If you'd asked me a year ago who I trusted most in the world, I wouldn't have hesitated. It would have been a tie. Megan and Daniel. Megan came first. We were 16, stuck in the same math class with a teacher who droned like static. She passed me a note. "If I die in here, delete my browser history." And I laughed so hard the teacher sent me into the hall. She joined me 2 minutes later. That was it. Instant friendship. We grew up side by side, filling in each other's gaps. She was bolder, the one who dared us to sneak into clubs with fake IDs. I was the cautious one, holding her hair back after tequila, but still texting her the next morning to check she was alive. She knew every version of me. The awkward teen who lied about having kissed someone, the 20-year-old who flunked an exam and sobbed in the bathroom, the woman who once almost married the wrong guy. I told her things I never said out loud to anyone else, about my family, about my fears of becoming invisible, about how badly I wanted a life that felt like mine. She was my vault, and I was hers. There's a certain safety in having someone who's witnessed every bad haircut, every heartbreak, every stupid decision, and still sticks around. That's what Megan was to me, proof I was never completely alone. Daniel entered the picture later. We'll still call him Daniel. I met him at Megan's birthday party, actually, one of those crowded bar nights where everyone's shouting over music. He wasn't loud. That's what caught me. He was leaning against the wall with a gin and tonic, smiling at Megan's story like he'd heard it before, but still found it funny. She pulled me over, introduced us. "This is Daniel. Good guy. You'll like him." I did. He was steady in a way that balanced Megan's chaos and my overthinking. He didn't rush to impress, didn't act like the smartest man in the room. He listened. We started dating a few months later, and Megan was the first person I told. She squealed, clapped her hands like she'd set us up on purpose, and said, "Finally, my 2 favorite people in one place." That blessing meant something. It made me feel like we were a triangle, solid on all sides. No competition, no jealousy, just overlap. Megan was the friend who kept my secrets. Daniel was the partner who held my hand. Together, they were my circle, and I didn't think circles broke. Daniel and Megan got along, of course. Too well sometimes, but I chalked it up to good chemistry. He'd laugh at her wild stories. She'd tease him about his bad taste in trainers. It felt harmless, like siblings ribbing each other. If anything, I was grateful. Not every boyfriend fits neatly into the world you've already built. Daniel did. Or so I thought. There were small things, now that I look back. Megan started staying later when she visited, lingering after I said I was tired. I'd head to bed, assuming she'd let herself out. Sometimes I'd wake up and hear their voices in the living room, still talking. Daniel made a joke once. "She's here so much, she should start paying rent." I laughed because it sounded lighthearted. Megan rolled her eyes and tossed a cushion at him. And I didn't think more of it. Why would I? These were my people. That's the cruel thing about hindsight. It makes you want to go back and shake yourself. To say, look harder, don't shrug it off, the cracks are right there. But in the moment, those cracks just looked like quirks. I told myself what anyone in my position would. If there was anything between them, they'd tell me. And I believed it. Hospitals are strange places. Everyone sees everything. Even when you think you're half asleep, half dazed, someone else is clocking who came, who stayed, who left. One of the nurses on my ward, a woman named Carla, who'd gone to school with Megan's older sister, leaned down one afternoon to check my chart and said casually, "Your friend's been so sweet. Coming by with food. You're lucky." I blinked, groggy. "Megan?" She smiled. "Yeah, she brought your boyfriend some lunch the other day. He was waiting for you to wake up." I nodded, trying to look like that was normal, like I'd known. But in my head, something shifted. Megan hadn't mentioned it, and Daniel hadn't either. Later, when I asked, Daniel shrugged it off. "Oh, she just dropped some stuff off for when you came home. Didn't want to bother you." He said it like it was obvious, like it wasn't worth repeating. His hand found mine. His thumb rubbed circles on my wrist like he could calm the question out of me. She was helping. And maybe she was. Megan had always been the type to fuss, to fill fridges, to mother people when they didn't ask. I wanted to believe it. So I did. But once a shadow forms in your mind, it doesn't leave. It follows you into the quiet moments. It sits in the corners of conversations. I started noticing little things. How Daniel's phone seemed to buzz more often, and he'd flip it over, screen down. How Megan's texts to me were shorter, more distracted. How when the two of them stood near each other in my hospital room, there was an ease that didn't include me. I told myself it was paranoia, stirred up by painkillers and boredom. But the seed had been planted. When I finally got discharged, Daniel came to pick me up. He looked tired, stubble, rumpled shirt, like he'd been stretched thin between work and hospital visits. I felt guilty for doubting him. Guilty for even thinking Megan could cross a line. They were my people. The safest people I had. That night, when he was unpacking my things at the flat, I went to hang his jacket by the door. His pocket sagged with something. Reflexively, I reached in. A card. I recognized Megan's handwriting instantly. I'd seen it on birthday cards, on Post-it notes stuck to my mirror, on the napkin she slipped under my exam desk once. "Breathe. You've got this." The card was pastel blue with embossed daisies. Inside, "Get well soon. Can't wait to see you back on your feet. Love you." At the bottom, a lipstick kiss print. Smudged, but unmistakable. I stood frozen, the jacket slipping from my arm. When I asked Daniel about it, my voice cracked. "Why do you have this?" He looked over, confused, then annoyed, then calm again. "Megan gave it to me to pass along to you. You were half asleep." I forgot. "Love you?" I whispered. He shrugged like it was nothing. "That's how she signs things. You know Megan." But I did know Megan. I knew her handwriting, her timing, her habits. She didn't sign "love you" on every card. She didn't add lipstick kisses for me. The room felt smaller, like the walls were pressing in. I wanted to throw the card at him, to scream, to demand why he hadn't just given it to me. But I didn't. I slid the card back into the pocket, hands trembling. That was the first undeniable crack. Small enough to ignore if I really wanted to, big enough to haunt me if I didn't. I lay awake that night, the smell of unfamiliar perfume still clinging to the sheets, the echo of Mrs. Patel's voice in my head. They've been here a lot. And now, this card. For the first time, I wondered if the worst pain wasn't behind me. Maybe it was still waiting. The card sat on the kitchen counter like it was radioactive. I'd left it there overnight, hoping Daniel would be the one to bring it up again, to admit something, anything. But he didn't. He just brewed coffee the next morning, whistling quietly like nothing had happened. I picked it up and slid it toward him. My hand was shaking, and I hated that he could see it. "Daniel, why did Megan give this to you and not me?" He barely looked up, just flicked his eyes at it, then back at the kettle. "We went over this, Elise. You were half asleep. Tubes, wires. She didn't want to bother you. She asked me to pass it along. I forgot." "You forgot?" My voice cracked. "She wrote 'love you' with a lipstick kiss. You don't forget something like that." That's when he sighed. Not in shock, not in guilt. In annoyance. Like I'd asked him the same stupid question 3 times during a movie. "That's Megan. She's always been dramatic. It's her sense of humor. Why are you making this into something?" That tone, flat, patient, dismissive, landed harder than the words. It made me feel 12 again, being scolded for talking too much in class. Like I was the silly one, the hysterical one. Later, when I brought it up to Megan herself, I braced for awkwardness, maybe even an apology. What I got instead was laughter, full, open laughter that echoed in my ears for hours afterward. "Elise, oh my God, seriously. I put a kiss because I was wearing lipstick and I thought it'd be cute. You've seen me do that before." She rolled her eyes, still laughing. "And love you? Babe, I signed that on emails to my boss. It's just a thing. You really think I'd—" She broke off, shaking her head like I was beyond saving. In that moment, I almost apologized. For questioning her. For doubting. That's how quick it happens. You get hit with enough confidence, enough calmness, and suddenly you're the one who feels guilty. When I tried to talk about it with Daniel again, he softened his approach. He pulled me into his arms, pressed his lips to my forehead. "You've been through so much, Els. You're exhausted. The meds, the stress. It makes sense you're sensitive right now. Anyone would be." Sensitive. That word stuck like a splinter. Because I was sensitive. My body was still bruised, stitched, fragile. My mind wasn't sharp. I'd forget small things, lose track of time. But the card was real. The lipstick was real. My unease was real. Wasn't it? The longer I sat with it, the more confused I became. It was like living in 2 parallel worlds. In one, Megan was just being Megan, overly affectionate, cheeky, dramatic. In the other, she was broadcasting something I wasn't supposed to see. And Daniel? He was either a loyal boyfriend patiently caring for a paranoid partner, or a man hiding behind rehearsed calm. I started testing my friends. I slipped the story into conversations, changing little details. The responses came back split right down the middle. "Come on, Elise, Megan signs everything that way. You know what she's like." I don't know, that's weird, but maybe she was just messing around. And then there were the ones who went silent. The kind of silence that isn't neutral. It's complicit. It says, "I don't want to be part of this conversation because I might have to pick a side." The silence was worse than the denial. At night, lying next to Daniel, my mind spun itself raw. Every time Megan had stayed late. Every time Daniel's phone buzzed face down. Every time they'd shared a private joke in the corner of my hospital room that didn't include me. And still, I tried to strangle the doubt. To convince myself I was wrong. Because if I wasn't, if I was right, then the 2 people I trusted most in the world were the ones breaking me. And that was too much to face. I'd lie there rehearsing both scripts. In one version, they were innocent. I was fragile, insecure, inventing shadows. In the other, they were guilty. And I was the last to know. Some nights I'd cry quietly into my pillow, pressing the sound down so Daniel wouldn't wake up. Other nights I'd stare at the ceiling until morning, my chest locked tight, whispering to myself, "Don't be crazy. Don't be crazy. Don't be crazy." But here's the thing about gaslighting. It doesn't just make you doubt them. It makes you doubt yourself, your memory, your instincts, even your sanity. And once you start to believe maybe you are crazy, you're already losing. I used to believe timelines were solid, straightforward. Things happened in sequence. You wake up, you go to work, you come home. Simple. But once suspicion enters your bloodstream, time stops being linear. It curls back on itself. You start replaying moments from 6 months ago like they just happened yesterday. You look at old photos like they're crime scenes, searching for something you missed. That's what I did with Daniel and Megan. At first, I wasn't even looking for proof. I was looking for reassurance. I wanted to remind myself that I was paranoid, that the pieces didn't fit, that it was all coincidence. But the more I lined things up, the more it felt like a script they'd written together. Daniel had always been a late nights guy. He worked in project management, which meant deadlines were often vague, flexible, always somehow falling at 9 p.m. "I'll be late," he'd text. "Don't wait up." And Megan? She had her girls' nights. She'd post a quick boomerang, a wine glass, some blurry laughing faces, nothing concrete, and then she'd go silent until the morning. For months, I'd never thought to connect them. Why would I? One was my boyfriend, the other my best friend. Their alibis didn't overlap, they balanced each other. If Daniel wasn't around, Megan was. If Megan wasn't, Daniel was. I thought it was fate, some protective net around me. But going back through my phone, through messages and photos and scraps of memory, I noticed the pattern. His late nights matched her girls' nights almost perfectly. Not every time, but enough. Too many to ignore. And the hospital? That's when it hit me hardest. At first, I'd been grateful for how they coordinated visits. When Daniel needed to leave for work, Megan would slip in with flowers or snacks. When Megan ducked out, Daniel returned, coffee in hand. They always made sure I wasn't alone. I thought it was loyalty, teamwork. Now, through the haze of hindsight, it looked like choreography. A routine polished until it seemed natural. Perfect handoffs, like actors trading lines. I remembered a particular Saturday. Megan had come in the morning, laughing, saying she couldn't stay long. She fixed my pillows, fed me grapes from a paper cup like it was a joke. Then she left. Daniel arrived 2 hours later, hair damp, shirt freshly changed. He said he'd run errands. Back then, I smiled at the effort. Now, it made me nauseous. Another memory. Megan telling me she'd been stuck in traffic when she visited late one evening. She looked flushed, hair slightly messy. Daniel walked in 30 minutes later, complaining about a last-minute call from work. They never crossed paths that night. They never had to. The more I examined it, the more my stomach turned. I started writing it all down in a notebook. Dates, excuses, overlaps. My handwriting grew jagged, frantic. It felt like assembling a puzzle I didn't want to finish. And then there was the night before my surgery. Megan had left around 10 p.m., squeezing my hand and promising she'd be back first thing in the morning. Daniel told me he was staying overnight, but at some point in the middle of the night, I woke up and the chair beside my bed was empty. When I asked him the next day, he said he'd gone home to shower. At the time, I believed him. Now I wondered if he'd really gone home at all. The worst part wasn't the suspicion itself. It was realizing how long it might have been happening. How many times I'd been smiling at them both, thanking them both, while they shared secret glances over my head. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Every memory becomes corrupted, every detail suspect. I couldn't remember the good times anymore without wondering what they were hiding behind them. And that's when the real sickness set in. Not in my body, that was healing, slowly but surely. No. This sickness was in my mind, my heart, the infection of doubt. I stared at my notebook one night, the pages filled with dates, arrows, cross-references. I should have felt triumphant for connecting the dots. Instead, I felt hollow, like I'd been living inside a lie that was too seamless, too well-constructed for me to notice until now. I whispered it aloud, the truth finally too heavy to keep in my chest. I wasn't imagining it. I was recovering while they were rehearsing their alibi. Sometimes the truth doesn't come from dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it slips in sideways, from the mouth of someone who has no reason to lie. For me, it was the hospital volunteer. I'd gone back weeks later for a checkup. Routine, blood work, a quick chat with the surgeon, nothing heavy. Afterward, I was waiting in the lobby for a taxi when a familiar face appeared, the older woman who used to bring magazines and cups of tea around the ward. She recognized me immediately. "Oh, you're looking well," she said warmly, patting my arm. "It's good to see you out of bed." We talked for a moment, the kind of small talk you do with someone who once saw you at your lowest. Then she smiled knowingly. "And you had such lovely company, too. Your boyfriend and your friend. They came in together a lot. Always cheerful, always close." Close. That one word landed like a punch. I forced a smile, nodded, thanked her. But inside, everything froze. My taxi pulled up, and I don't even remember the ride home. I just sat there, staring at my hands, hearing her voice replay in my head. They came in together a lot, Always close. I had never known them to visit together. Not once. Not in my version of the story. The second I got home, I dug through my phone. I pulled up old messages, looking for gaps, overlaps, anything. And there it was. The night I'd been too drugged to keep my eyes open, Megan had texted Daniel from the hospital Wi-Fi. A string of messages about heading home soon, emojis, little jokes. She hadn't texted me. I scrolled further. More messages. Same pattern. Whenever she told me she was leaving early, she was actually messaging him. Sometimes just minutes after she'd left my bedside. I remember holding my breath, scrolling and scrolling, feeling like the air was draining out of the room. The more I found, the worse it got. It wasn't explicit, not yet, but it wasn't innocent either. And then came the real crack in the facade. It was a Tuesday night. I was half delirious on painkillers, scrolling aimlessly through Instagram. Megan had posted a story. A cozy shot of her bedroom, fairy lights glowing, a coffee mug on the nightstand. At first, nothing about it registered, until I noticed the hoodie draped over her chair. Not just any hoodie. Daniel's hoodie. Black, with a faded graphic across the front, a tiny bleach stain near the cuff. The same hoodie he'd worn into the hospital 3 days earlier. The same one I'd washed for him 100 times, folded in my drawer. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling. I stared at the photo until the screen dimmed, then lit it back up again, pinching to zoom. It wasn't a lookalike. It wasn't coincidence. It was his. I felt like I'd been set on fire. In a panic, I checked her highlights. There it was again, weeks earlier. A blurry selfie of Megan in her bedroom mirror. I hadn't noticed it at the time. But now, Daniel's hoodie again, half zipped over her tank top, and suddenly, everything was clear. The card with the lipstick, the synchronized visits, the empty chair the night Daniel supposedly stayed with me, the 2 perfect handoffs, the matching excuses, the way my friends had gone quiet. I thought I'd been losing my mind. But no. I'd been losing my reality, piece by piece, while they built their own right in front of me. I wanted to scream, to call them both out right then, to throw the evidence in their faces. But instead, I just sat there in my bedroom, shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I scrolled back to that volunteer's words echoing in my head. They came in together a lot. Always close. Close enough to walk through the hospital doors side by side. Close enough to make jokes in the corner while I drifted in and out of pain. Close enough for him to leave my room and crawl into her bed wearing the same hoodie. I pressed my palms to my face, sobbing, furious, humiliated. Every ounce of dignity I had left felt stripped away. Because it wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just infidelity. It was betrayal that I'd bankrolled. My rent, my food, my body, my sickness had left me vulnerable, and they'd taken advantage of it. They'd carved out their little world right inside my recovery. The worst part, I had thanked them for it, smiled at them, hugged them, told them I couldn't have gotten through it without them. And maybe I hadn't. But not for the reasons I thought. Because in the end, they hadn't been my caregivers. They'd been rehearsing their alibi, perfecting it, using my illness as cover. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept staring at the photo until my eyes burned. Every time I closed them, I saw the hoodie in her room, my hoodie on his back, my trust stretched between them like a rope they'd been tugging until it snapped. And somewhere in the middle of all that anger and heartbreak, I realized something cold, something sharp enough to cut through the fog. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't weak or sensitive or making things up. I had been right. From the very beginning. And if they thought their story was airtight, if they thought no one would ever see it, they'd underestimated the wrong person. I'd always imagined the talk would be some dramatic movie scene. Yelling, maybe something thrown, tears streaming. But when the time actually came, it was quiet. Too quiet. I texted both of them, Megan and Daniel, and told them we needed to talk. No details, just that. They came, like they had no idea what storm was waiting. We sat in my living room, the 3 of us, with the curtains drawn. I'd set out 3 glasses of water because I didn't trust myself not to throw anything heavier. They sat side by side on the couch. That, in itself, told me everything. My boyfriend of 3 years and my best friend since high school. Aligned, braced, ready. I started slowly, carefully. I spoke to a volunteer at the hospital, I said. She told me you two came in together a lot. Always looked close. Megan laughed nervously, brushing it off. Daniel shifted in his seat, shaking his head. So I pulled out my phone. The photo? Megan's bedroom, fairy lights, coffee mug, and his hoodie, right there. I set the phone down on the table between us. Explain this. The silence was heavier than any shouting could have been. Megan went first. It's just a hoodie. You know how we all used to share clothes. It doesn't mean anything. I turned to Daniel. And the texts? The late-night messages from hospital Wi-Fi when you said you were asleep? What about those? His jaw tightened. You're making it sound worse than it was. Worse than it was. As if there was a lighter version of betrayal. I leaned forward, my voice breaking but steady. Just tell me the truth. For once. Stop making me feel like I'm crazy. Were you two together? While I was in the hospital? And that's when it happened. The words I'll never forget. Daniel exhaled sharply, rubbing his face with both hands. Then he looked at me and said, flat, almost cold. We didn't think you'd notice. The room tilted. He didn't say no. He didn't deny it. He admitted it, just like that, like it was a small mistake on their part, like the only problem was me figuring it out. My best friend looked at the floor, silent. My boyfriend, the man who'd held my hand before surgeries, stared right at me and confessed not with guilt, but with calculation. We didn't think you'd notice. As if my recovery, my medication, my fogged-up mind had been the perfect cover. As if they'd actually sat together and decided I was too weak, too distracted, too drugged to catch them. That's when everything inside me shifted. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't begging. The grief burned off, leaving only something sharp, something solid. You, I said slowly, staring at Megan, were supposed to be my family, my sister. And you, I turned to Daniel, were supposed to love me. And instead, you both used my sickness as your excuse. Megan finally looked up, eyes glassy. It just happened. We didn't plan it. I laughed. Actually laughed. A short, bitter sound. You didn't plan it? You planned everything. The visits, the lies, the timing. You choreographed your betrayal right in front of me and thought I'd thank you for it. Daniel leaned back, arms crossed now, defensive. You're making this bigger than it is. It's not like... I cut him off. Bigger than it is? You slept with my best friend while I was hooked up to machines in a hospital bed. What's smaller than that? They had no answer. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The air felt scorched, heavy. Finally, I stood. My voice was calm. Too calm. Get out. Both of you. I don't care where you go, but it won't be here. Megan tried to say my name, reaching out, but I stepped back. Daniel muttered something under his breath. I didn't even care enough to ask what. They gathered their things. Quietly, like children caught doing something unforgivable. When the door shut behind them, I stood alone in the silence. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel crazy. I felt free, because the truth, as ugly as it was finally mine. The night I kicked them out, I blocked them both. Phone, socials, email, gone. I even called the bank to shut down the last of the shared links. No lingering ties, no loose ends. It was strange at first, how quiet my world became. For months, their voices had filled every space. The hospital room, my living room, even my head. Without them, there was just silence. But silence turned out to be a gift. I filled it with myself. I started small, cooking meals that only I liked, rearranging the furniture, deleting photos, letting the apartment smell like my candles, not her perfume or his cologne. It wasn't just about erasing them. It was about reclaiming my space. Once my doctors cleared me, I booked a trip. Alone. A week by the coast, nothing fancy, just me and the sea air. I packed light, left my phone on airplane mode most of the time, and let my body heal in sync with my mind. For the first time, I wasn't worried about who was texting who or what story was being spun behind my back. I walked on the beach. I journaled. I ate ice cream at 10 a.m. simply because I could. It hit me one evening, watching the sun drop behind the horizon, that I hadn't just been recovering from surgery. I'd been recovering from them. And somewhere along the way, I realized the truth. They weren't my support system. They were each other's excuse. That's the part no one tells you about betrayal. Sometimes losing two people at once is actually subtraction by addition. I came home lighter, stronger, not naive, not broken, but rebuilt. They can keep their story, whatever version they tell people. I don't need to defend mine anymore. Because I lived it, and I survived it. And now, when I think about them, it's not with rage or longing. It's with clarity. They didn't just lose me. They lost the version of me who would have forgiven them. And that's the one loss they'll never get back.